There is a divorce happening in UX right now, and it feels like nobody's talking about it, but Dan and I are about to talk about it. So, information architects have been doing the deep structural work, figuring out what things are, what they're called, how they relate to each other, mostly on content heavy sites. And product designers have been doing their thing, flows and screens and prototypes, kind of without touching any of this structural stuff. So these two disciplines, same problem space, just barely talking to each other. And AI, y'all, AI is about to make this very, very expensive. So if you're a designer who feels like you're always fighting the current, like your team is just building in circles and stakeholders are using different words for the same things and the same words for different things, and somehow the product just keeps getting more complicated instead of less complicated, this episode is for you. My guest today spent 18 years co-running 8 Shapes, a boutique design agency that became one of the most respected names in design systems and component documentation. And then last year, him and Nathan decided to walk away from it, not because it wasn't working, but because he missed the deep craft work. He wanted to get back to the things that he actually loves. Information architecture mainly, product discovery, and figuring out what a product fundamentally is before anyone starts building a single screen. So you can see why we get along, right? So he now runs Curious Squid Design Lab, where he does exactly that for enterprise teams. He helped establish the Information Architecture Institute back in 2002. Dan teaches. I recently went to a workshop with Dan at the Information Architecture Conference. He writes a newsletter called Spilling Ink, which we'll link in the show notes. He has a podcast about disinformation called Unchecked with our friend Rachel Price. And he said something at the workshop that I attended that I wrote down immediately, and I had to ask him about it. If you're looking to level up your UX, content, or product design practice to confidently and joyfully tackle complexity, ask the million-dollar questions, and design digital systems that actually work, you are so in the right place. Welcome to the UX Level Up podcast. I'm Sophia Prater, and for over a decade, I've been teaching professionals how to make the most valuable and often invisible parts of UX gloriously visible. We will untangle the structure beneath the surface before jumping into screens, saving time, money, and headaches, and having so much fun doing it. Together, let's UX collaboration, break down silos, and build shared understanding that sets everyone up for success. Let's become the systems thinkers that our teams, and quite honestly, the world, are so desperately craving. Let's level up our practice and redefine what it means to be a UX designer. Let's jump into it. Dan, you said, as we do more AI, shoddy IA will show. And legions of UI designers who cannot see beneath the screens are going to create some real problems. So that was that? Like, you said that.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. Okay, good. Good. You still agree with yourself? Good.
Yeah.
Because that's why we're here right now. Because, I mean, you said a lot of really cool things, but that one hit me. I was like, yes, it is going to be a problem. So let's start here with the idea of product information architecture. That was the workshop that I took. So there's like this weird divorce happening where information architecture practitioners like tend to seem to stay in the content and publishing world. And then we have product designers who like treat information architecture like it's homework or something. Right? Like, so what's going on here? Like, why are these two things not talking to each other? What have you seen?
That's an interesting question. I like it. I do want to sort of correct the record first. Nathan and I mutually decided to dissolve 8 Shapes. So this was not one of us walking away. It was like every decision that we made when we had our partnership, it was a mutual collaborative decision. So
amazing. And that was my understanding too. That's good to make that clear though.
Yes, yeah.
For the record.
Like, I wasn't like, see you, Nathan, I'm out. No, it was months of heartfelt conversations.
As it should be.
Yeah, it was, I think he and I would agree that it was, in many ways, the pinnacles of our careers. We had so much fun running that shop, and our partnership was really strong. So, but it was time. It was time to say goodbye.
And actually, let's just dive into that before we get to this interesting question about product information architecture. Because sometimes we stay in this world when we have something good going, we tend to maybe even stay on it too long. Like when you were having those conversations with yourself and Nathan, like what made you decide that you needed to start over? Like
Mhm.
how did you, just, asking for a friend, how did you know and make that decision that it was time for something new?
I think it was true for several years, in fact, but because I felt safe, and I felt safe at Eight Shapes, but the world is changing. And the way he and I wanted to pursue our crafts were changing. Eight Shapes created a structure for us to do what we wanted to do, and we were able to do it for 18 years in that structure. But as the world was changing, as the practice of design was changing, we came to understand that the structure that we had designed within Eight Shapes was no longer supporting our pursuits. And that I like this story because it's sort of meta. It's the way I think about information architecture. We design a structure to do one thing, but when it comes time to do something else, many, many, many product teams try and reuse the same structure to do new things.
Yeah. And it's like this idea, the quote about like there's the chair and the chair is in the room and the room is in the house and the house is in the city.
Right.
Um Saarinen or Erner Saarinen. And it's like when the context changes, like if we're this
Mm,
person and we're in our context, and
yes.
you and a team and a structure can work really well in a context, but the context, if we're thinking like the context has changed
Yes,
a
completely.
lot.
So much.
And so we're going to change, and this idea that like we're going to change in different ways. Like something that
Right.
worked for 18 years, all of a sudden it's like, oh, things have changed so much. I kind of want to, I'm changing in this direction and you're changing in this direction, and this structure overall doesn't fit in this context anymore. And to be
I
aware of
mean,
that.
yeah, I mean, it's no accident, I think, that this also happened when he and I are both in our 50s now. And in some ways we bring that context to the context as well. We can't hire ourselves out as kind of large design teams anymore. That's not what people want to buy from someone like me. They want to buy, expertise and experience and mentorship and all of these other kinds of things. And Eight Shapes just wasn't really set up to do that kind of stuff. So
Interesting. Okay, thank you for that.
yeah,
Okay, so to talk about this, like for the product and information architecture, like why aren't they why aren't they better friends?
I feel like I'm going to be wrestling with this question for the rest of my career. And that is the fact that we information architects have a set of skills. And historically, those skills have been applied to content. How to organize the content, how to make content findable, how to tag content so that when we search for it, it comes up. How do we connect content together? Like all of these things we want to have, we create structures around content. And yet, any information system has a structure to it. And yet, the practice of information architecture doesn't really come up as often. I don't know, I have hypotheses. I don't have a good sort of fundamental single principle that led to this bifurcation. But I think part of it is the history of information architecture and the history of the web started with, content led products, content led systems. And there was an opportunity for people with a background in library science to step in and apply the things that they learned there. It's only, in the kind of, let's call it latter 2/3 of the life of the web as we know it today, where there were more transactional systems. And even so, those transactional systems started out very simple. The structures underlying them didn't need to be very complex. It's only in the last, call it now, third, where we are building these tremendous enterprise products that have a lot of moving parts and have a lot of kind of underlying structural concerns that we're starting to really feel that need for information architecture. But when we say information architecture, people think about that content stuff.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and it kind of goes in line with my hypothesis that it was like when like when UX came on the scene, it was kind of like born out of usability and
Mm,
usability testing. And usability testing was like, how do we get people from A to B? So it
right.
was about that transaction, often like,
Yeah.
can they complete their purchase? Right.
Right.
So does their credit card, where do they drop off, and like putting their credit card information in and like getting from like product page to cart to checkout. And so it was all about this usability testing. I mean, even when
Right.
I entered the field in around 2008, it was like all the usability testing companies were like doing really well. And it was just, can
Right.
we get them through the process? But now, as you're saying, like with these enterprise tools and these much more sophisticated environments for getting shit done,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
There's so many processes. And what so much has happened is we just have these bowls of spaghetti of like processes and flows. And we've just been focusing on the flows without thinking about the concepts that
Right.
are supporting those flows and like, what are we doing the thing to? And it just kind of like, we just kind of have been working in parallel without
Parallel.
a whole
Yeah.
lot of cross pollination. And I think it's you and me and a handful of other people that are like, we need to talk.
I mean, the work gets done. I don't
Yeah.
know that it's always called information architecture. And there's also part of me that wonders, should we call it information architecture?
Yeah.
But but labeling even for an
Yeah.
IA, like labeling conversations are complicated here.
Yeah.
I think the other thing, as you're talking, it's making me think that we, the transactional systems that we had designed very much followed a process. And maybe this
Mm-hmm.
is what you were getting at. And I feel like that kind of linear metaphor, that linear framing
Mm-hmm.
of the structures that we design are not as relevant anymore because what we're designing are two-dimensional, are they're spaces or three-dimensional in which people do work. And so there may be individual processes within those spaces, but really the system that we're creating online, the system that we're designing online is a space in which stuff gets done. And I do think because it's often intersecting multiple tangential processes that are happening to each other, we have to think about it not just as a single process, but as a space in which people participate in. And
Right.
immediately that creates more complexity and a greater need for underlying structure to facilitate the activities in that space.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. And like the another interesting thing, I want to go back to labeling. Like I'm over here calling it object-oriented UX in the orca process,
I
right?
mean,
So,
what
but
I like about that label is I think it brings in UX, which information architecture as a label just seems almost detached from it.
mhm,
And it brings in this idea that there's a framing that can be useful when we think about user experience. And that framing isn't necessarily in user stories or, any other journeys, any of the other tools that we have. It starts with the information and framing those as objects, which again resonates with
yeah,
people who grew up in object-oriented programming. So I think as a
right.
label, it makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. Thanks.
Sure,
I still debate it with myself sometimes, but I bought
you got
that
to do it.
URL. I got that four-letter URL, so we're sticking
You
with
got to do
it.
it. You got
You got,
got
I'm
to
married
ride
to
that
it.
as long as possible. Yeah.
Yes, I do. I do. So to go back to like the processes, these worlds that we are creating that are filled with concepts, and these concepts are connected to each other in some way, and then people need to like do things to these objects, and there's little processes, some bigger, some smaller, kind of spawning off of all of these things in this environment. An interesting thing is with agentic AI, and like the AI is going to be doing those processes more and more. We're like actually having to go click through. Like the first app that I've seen that does this natively within the app is, of all apps that I use, Mighty Networks, which
What is
is,
Mighty Networks?
it's where we host our OUX forum. And they sent me an email recently, which I would usually just delete, but it was something about AI. So I was like, oh, look at it. And there's this little GIF of somebody typing in the chat and saying, hey, can you rename these spaces? And then the
Hmm.
system renamed the spaces. And I was like, does it
Whoa.
really work? So I went in
Interesting.
there. Yes, I have not. ChatGPT doesn't do this. Claude doesn't do this. I cannot affect objects within Claude by
Right.
chatting.
Right.
So Mighty Networks is the first one to do this, and they've done a lot wrong, but they like, okay, y'all are ahead of the game here. But you can just see the writing on the wall. Where now, if I need to I was like, can you alphabetize this? Like, I have these 17 spaces in this collection. Can you go ahead and alphabetize these spaces for me? And you just watch them move around. Can
Right.
you create a new plan that includes like space X, Y, and Z and price it at $777?
Wow.
Okay, what kind of permissions do you want on that plan?
Wow.
Yeah. So it just does it. It just does it. And you can see the interface moving around. And so, I mean, I think we're still going to need buttons. We're still going to need
Right.
buttons, and because some people are still going to want to click the buttons, but more and more people are just going to ask to do things, but you still need the objects. You still need to be able to know how to label, and you need to know what they're called too. Like for me to be able to do that, I need to know what a space, a collection, and a plan is and how they relate to each other for me to actually even tell the system what to do.
Yes, precisely. Yeah. There's still an underlying structure there. It is allowing users to apply different names to those structures and create new instances of those objects, to use your wording. But yeah, there's still a structure there. There's no service without those objects. That service can't exist unless there's something there. And one of the challenges that I see people dealing with is level of abstraction. We talk a little bit about this in the workshop, right?
It's in my list of questions. Let's go. Level of abstraction.
Well, the idea is like when we say the word plan and when you see it in the context of Mighty Networks, you have an understanding of what that means. We can choose words that are more generalized or more specific, and I can't think of them off the top of my head, but you can sort of name that object, that type of object, different things to imply a certain level of flexibility or rigidity to it.
So for plan, like more rigid would be subscription.
Yes.
And like less rigid would be like space group.
or account, or like just something that it just feels very that kind of establishes a framing of something needs to be paid for, but it's not clear exactly what it is.
Your example in the workshop, just for those that are like, what are you talking about? Level of abstraction is really like an easier example would be animal would be very, very abstract. And then we have pet, which is maybe somewhere in the middle. And then we have dog which would be very, very specific. And you have trade-offs.
Inevitably, it's dog related. Yes.
Cat. Yeah. We're cat people here. It's the cat.
Yeah. So that's the example I use in the workshop is when you think about a client, you're creating a system that for a business that supports clients, you can kind of imply different levels of specificity depending on what you name that object, right? Person would be kind of the most general, but a person could be a client or it could be a partner or it could be a subcontractor. And so you can then sort of think about how do I get more specific? The more specific you get, the less flexible the system is in the long run. So
yeah. And when I teach this, like, I literally call it level of specificity. And we have like these, like, you can think about inheritance with like base objects with their extensions. And we have like, there are all sorts of little patterns that you could use to really get to that level of specificity that's going to work for your system. And there is such an art to that. And it can actually be, I think you even said that abstraction is subjective. Too,
yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think I might have argued a little bit, but I think I'm coming over to your side with that one. That it is subjective.
I think it challenged some assumptions that you have, and I think that's good. That's healthy that you confronted those assumptions.
I think that there's a more right and a more wrong answer for a certain, challenge or product that you're working on.
Right.
Yeah. So if you're in a domain.
What makes something more right to you?
It's intuitive. You just feel it out.
It feels good. That's what it is.
It feels right. So it's coming to those trade-offs and really doing the analysis of the trade-offs and saying, okay, do we want this level of specificity here? Is that going to serve us in some way to be able to say, like, it's not just a pet. We're going to go down to that level and say, okay, we'll have a base object for pet, and then we'll have extensions for cat, dog, and fish. Okay, well, that's more expensive, right? To have the extensions for cat, dog, and fish. But we can even do it in a way so we're planning ahead and we're saying, okay, well, right now we're going to set up the database in a way. We're going to set up our technology even in a way to know that we're going to start off with just pets. And later on, you're going to be able to say whether your pet is a dog, cat, or fish. And then you'll get additional attributes based on that. Like you'll get bark level versus like a cat might only have
Or versus outdoor.
indoor
Yes.
versus outdoor
Yeah.
or declawed or not, and like that would be specific. So that costs money to do that. And then also, when do I introduce it? Because if we go and we have 10,000 users that just have pets, and then we say, okay, we're going to upgrade and we're going to add this level of specificity so we can like get more attributes and do more things. Now people need to go update all their pet profiles to add this additional information. So now we sort of have to backfill, and we have to tell people to backfill so that they can get these features, versus saying, well, let's just go ahead and go out the gate with this. It's going to take this much more effort to develop down to that level of specificity, but now we're going to get that information as soon as people sign up.
Right.
So it's those conversations of just trade-offs.
So I like the trade-off framing a lot. Here's another way of thinking about what makes something more right or more wrong.
Okay.
Is what language resonates best, or we might say aligns better with a typical mental model that someone has of it.
Totally.
And what I've found is sometimes you walk into an organization and the organization, say, belongs to a larger domain, let's say hospitality. And hospitality as a domain has a standard language for how it refers to, renting a room or things like that. But the organization has developed its own lore or mythology or kind of language about it, which might be slightly different from what is in the overall domain. Moreover, when I walk in, I don't know anything about hospitality. I start looking at these things and I see patterns that they don't see because they're in it. So now we have three different mental models. We have mine, the consultant showing up. We have the one inside the organization, and we have the one that's more generally associated with the domain. And we have to ask ourselves, how much are we going to, which one do we want to get closest to, right? Which one do we want to build upon because there may be value in aligning more closely with the industry, or that may be a differentiator for the organization. So they may want to stick more closely with the way they frame these things, or they need a shakeup. They need a new way of looking at these things. So they're going to go with the way the consultant is looking at them. I'm dealing with a company right now. I'm just helping them with navigation. Navigation is such a great way of surfacing these biases too, because they have a story they want to tell, but they are being evaluated next to a bunch of competitors. And so how much do they want to align with what the competitors are doing so that you can compare apples to apples? How much do they want to differentiate what they are doing? How much do they just want to try and resonate more closely with their users? So there are lots of different ways to think about how we frame the elements of a domain because of the variety of mental models that are out there.
That just like that kind of blew my mind a little bit, because even like going in deeper, there's like within the organization, there's different mental models.
Oh yeah.
Right. So like marketing, like you kind of brought like the competitive analysis, like, well, we want to call it this special thing, even though it's the exact same thing. What we want to brand. And I usually tell people to that's not where you want your marketing, is to brand your objects, like labeling your objects, because I had a client and they had something called an augmented line item, and like the augmented line item will like go down in history for me. Like, what is this thing? What it's a campaign. It's just a campaign. Like that's like in the advertising world. And they wanted to call it,
nuts.
It was marketing that wanted to call it the augmented line item because somehow it would make it special. And I'm like, no, people are just going to confuse people. So yeah.
Alignment with mental model. Yes. Exactly.
And whose mental model?
And whose mental model? Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Hopefully the end users. But,
Yes.
Yeah.
Trade-offs. Yes.
Okay. So going back to like in our process, at least the first steps of our process are like carbon copies almost. Like we did what I call noun foraging. That was the first thing we did in the workshop, where we go and we like get the information. We're looking for all the nouns, and then we're starting to connect those nouns. So which is so important. What are the things of value? Because like you said before, like you don't have a product if you don't have those things. Like those are the holders of the value. Figuring out what is actually valuable to the people paying money for our thing. How do they define those things? What kind of edges can we put on those things? I'm going like this. I'm making little circles with my hands for those that are listening. And then we draw arrows between them. We connect them. How do these things fit in context? Because that helps further define those things. It also helps us with the navigation too, because we probably want to,
maybe
you want to navigate through the things. What happens when product teams skip that step? What do you see goes wrong when we don't do that work and we just often go straight to designing high fidelity screens?
So I think there's several risks that we can identify. Two that come to mind. One is people speaking different languages when they're trying to talk about the product that they are designing. So the value of identifying the underlying concepts of a product mean that we can sort of name names, right? We can sort of say, here are the things that we're dealing with. Here's what we call them, and here's what they entail. Here's what we understand them to be and where their boundaries are. That's just what you said, right? Understand where the boundaries are. And product teams that don't do that end up speaking at cross purposes or have, I think what it's more is that they have different conceptions of what it includes, back to abstraction, but also how big it is. Too, like, is this something that encompasses many flavors of this thing, or is it very narrow, the scope of what a concept is? I guess another way of thinking about it is, what role does this concept play in the product? Is this a big central idea that everything else hinges on, is the backbone for the thing? Or is this actually not an object in and of itself, but really a piece of metadata for something? Like, you can't have those conversations if you haven't at least made a list of what's in the domain, right? And I think the other thing I wanted to say is that the other risk that you face without having that is you don't have a sense of what the overall space is. And we've already touched on this. It makes it very difficult for the product to grow, to anticipate growth in the product. None of us have a crystal ball. None of us know what the future is. None of us can see what the trajectory of the product is, but we can take a pretty good guess if we've mapped out the overall space. So those are the two risks that I see, sort of collaboration risk and then a product planning or future proofing risk.
Right. We're on the same page about this. I mean, so first of all, like the collaboration, like you're using different words for the same thing and same words for different things, and you're trying to design complicated stuff together. Like that's a problem. You're not going to be collaborating, and when you're not collaborating, you are going in different directions, right? So you're actually stepping on each other's toes instead of being greater than the sum of your parts. Like, you want a team to be greater than the sum of its parts, right? Like that's the whole point. And so many teams are actually less than the sum of their parts because they don't have a shared language. I mean, lots of reasons, but like a shared language is a big one. So you just end up clopping on top of each other and moving in different directions. And this whole idea of like speed to market, we can't take the time to do this, is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard, because what is going to like waste more time than fighting against yourselves when you're all trying to like link arms and lock step and move in the same direction?
Right.
How are you supposed to do that? So collaboration, scope is probably one of the biggest problems. One of the biggest headaches I feel that UX designers deal with is like, is it in? Is it out? Like what part of this are we actually working on here? And then especially if you're in an agency world and you have clients, like being able to estimate a project, right? To say like, what are we actually doing? So this work can like how deep does the pet go, right? Like, are we doing this? Are we not doing this? And that doesn't take that much time. That's the thing. It's like, this is like 2, 3, maybe a week of work can save you so much time in the long run because you're just getting clear on your scope.
Right.
You also said like the role of the object, like that's prioritization. So not only the scope, but no, okay, we decided that these are the 6 objects that we're going to really be working on for the next 2 months. Is this thing like a small part and like as far as the value to the user and the value to the business, or is this a central part? Is this so how much time should I be spending literally on this detail page versus this detail page?
Right.
Because this object is very important versus not important. So we got scope, we got collaboration, we got prioritization. And then I think the fourth one you had was innovation. So having this wider picture, being able to not just be thinking in these 2-week increments or quarterly increments, now you can actually have a little bit of a horizon and a little bit more strategic planning.
Right. There's something else. I think there's also future-proofing the team. And what I mean by that is methods will change, right? And we've seen this, we're watching this unfold in real time as more designers adopt generative AI to support their processes. There's things that we cannot, or I don't think it's responsible for us to outsource. And this process that you and I are talking about, this method that we're talking about right now, is one of those things. It's a way to become intimately familiar with the domain, to have an opinion about what structures would best support the domain. But you can't do that unless you've gone through this process of really trying to understand all the concepts that make up the elements of the domain. Yeah. And what I mean by future-proofing the team is whatever way we end up producing user experience in the future, whether it's feeding a bunch of prompts into an AI, whether it's, moving rectangles around in Figma, whether it's sketching it on a piece of paper, having that, what we're calling a shared language, that concept model, whatever it is, a deep understanding and appreciation for the information space is crucial to any of those processes. I've been interviewing folks at a client, designers at a client, to try and help them identify sort of how they're going to integrate IA practices. And this is a theme that keeps coming up, is they don't have the time to kind of internalize all the different parts of the space in which they are working. And they're getting a lot more pressure to use tools at the back end of the process, like generative AI, a lot of kind of automated design reviews, things like this. But until they do that work up front, all of that stuff doesn't really help them at all. It just puts more pressure on them.
That is a perfect segue into my next question. And so now we're going to start saying AI and IA in the same sentence, and my dyslexia is like, oh God, I'm probably going to mess it up a couple times, but y'all know what we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, so this product information architecture, I might just need to say information architecture and artificial intelligence. I think in the workshop you called it a defense against the dark arts.
Did I? That sounds like something I would say.
Yeah. So when it comes to, okay, let's just use some generative AI, which is great, and AI is amazing, and I am just like the pivot that the inflection point that has happened in the last couple months is just wild. What we are seeing, and what I'm talking about is basically code getting good. Right. So the code was kind of good for like 2020, 23, 2024. You could prompt it and it would write some code for you, but you kind of had to know what it meant, right? You still had to look at that code. And then the end of last year, the end of 2025, with the models doing more reasoning, all of a sudden, the code is that's actually really good code. And you don't necessarily have to look at all the code. Right. You don't have to understand all of the code, which is a crazy inflection point that's happening here. And then also with that being able to, you can create really effective prototypes. You can also create really effective software. So that's the one thing that's happening. And then this other thing that's happening is generative UI. So I'm just throwing a bunch of stuff, right? There's generative UI, there's this. So, okay. So let's just go back to what you were seeing happening with this particular client, that they were saying, okay, we don't have time to do this work. Let's lean on artificial intelligence to solve our problems. But if you haven't done this work, why is that bad?
It's not just that. The things that I'm seeing, I get to talk to a lot of people, and I talk to them because I just sit here in my basement doing my client work, sometimes writing an essay, recording podcasts, but I really want to have an understanding of what's going on in teams. And it is a perspective that I don't have a ton of access to. The access that I do have is very limited to the clients that I have. So I like having conversations with folks to kind of hear what's going on. And the thing that I keep hearing is there is a frenzy. There is chaos. Their jobs are not getting easier. So this is not a tool that's made their jobs easier. I think we can look at, do you remember there was, maybe 10 years ago, the Figma versus Sketch battle, right, happening.
Yes.
And ultimately Figma won because at the time it was probably a better tool and it was anticipating the needs of designers and it was actually making our jobs easier. The stories that I hear about AI are not 100%, this is making my job easier.
Right.
Plus, there's the added pressure of a tool like Figma is really specific for what we do, right? To produce screens. A tool like AI has been sold as being able to do lots of different things. So not only are we being compelled as designers to use it as a design tool, the companies themselves are trying to figure out how do they make use of this tool to create value for their customers. So there's these kind of layers of pressure happening. I guess what I'm getting at is that what I have been doing myself and is working for me is spending as much time with the tool as I need to form an opinion about what it's good for and what it's not good for, because I found it to be not good for a lot of things. And getting my arms around a domain is not one of those things that it's particularly good at, because the inputs to that, first of all, because there are many inputs to that process of noun foraging. In the workshop, I give you a single piece of paper with a description of a pet sitting business. Obviously, in the real world, it would be much more complex than that. Plus, you have to integrate what you know about the organization if you're doing client work as well. But also, I think the earlier in the design process you are doing stuff, the more you need to create knowledge that you internalize, right? You're building a knowledge base to build from. And if you just let AI do that hard work, then you are not internalizing any of that knowledge. And there's been studies that show this kind of stuff. Like if you let AI come up with the answer, you don't own that answer. You don't have it in your soul, so to speak. I don't know if I'm answering your question.
No, you are. You are.
Those are the things that are on my mind.
It's this, so what you were touching on is how I've been saying this is like, you have to decide what you want to outsource, because what we outsource is going to atrophy. And if we are outsourcing our understanding,
yes,
we will get bad at understanding.
Right.
And then we will not be able to judge the output of the thing. So if we don't really understand the domain that we're designing for, we haven't built that understanding, we haven't built a shared language to talk to each other, how do we know that what is being outputted is even good?
Right.
So
that was well said. Yes.
That becomes, I've been saying it a lot. I've had practice saying it. It's become a mantra, because I had to realize that myself, where it's like, oh, is this something that I want to be outsourcing? Like, would I outsource this to an assistant? Like if I had an amazing assistant that could do XYZ, like, yes, totally. I don't want to be doing that shit, versus like, oh, like this is my bread and butter. Like I need to be able to look at a thing. I want to be able to understand the thing before I start designing for it. So like, in my opinion, screen design, I'll outsource that shit all day long. Like, I don't want to do that. But I want to build the model underneath that. And I also want to build the rules. So if you just give it a prompt, and even if it's a whole PRD, if you give it a whole PRD, it's still going to create things, what I call the 4 horsemen of the internet apocalypse. It's going to create shapeshifters where you have the same object that looks different in different places arbitrarily.
Yeah,
so you now are creating confusion. It'll do that. It'll look one way on one page and it'll look another way on another page, not because of a state change, not because of a life cycle change, just because it's a different page.
Right.
Completely arbitrary. So it'll do that because looking at past designs.
Right. And it can't internalize a domain model. It doesn't have a concept map in whatever it calls its brain. So
it doesn't really know what objects are. Like it
Right.
doesn't really know. Like it doesn't really, it can tell, it can simulate knowing like knowing how a fish and water relate, but it
Pretending to know.
doesn't
Yes.
really know how a
Right.
fish and water relate to each other, or
Yes.
like how the cat in the bed relate. Like it doesn't understand these real, like the thing that can, it can, you can look at a bunch of images and it can pull out the cats, sure, but it doesn't understand catness. It doesn't
Right.
understand the relationships between them. Yet, and my hypothesis is that for it to understand that, it needs a body.
Embodied cognition.
It needs
Yes.
embodied cognition, which
Yes.
once that really happens and we have AGI inside of robots that can feel and touch and actually see themselves, you got to see yourself as an object too, so you can understand
Yeah.
relationships. And once we have AGI that sees itself as an object, then we have way bigger problems.
Right. Yeah. I think I will be long dead
Yeah,
by
yeah. Well,
when
that'll
that
be
happens.
like how are we going to grow our own food? That's going to
Right.
be
Yeah.
like more of the problems we'll be
Yeah.
dealing with, but for sure. So the other thing that I see happening is like when we just start slapping on some artificial intelligence without doing the information architecture, and I want your opinion on this, is it's kind of this garbage in, garbage out thing. So if let's say we want to start leveraging artificial intelligence, but our databases are a big mess and we have missing information from them, like and the databases aren't really connected to each other, then like it's not gonna be able to give good information. You're not gonna be able to create like tactically, like you need to kind of create a knowledge base, and the knowledge base has to be good for RAG. So to be able to have that retrieval from the knowledge base, you kind of have to have a good quality knowledge base.
I mean, the fundamentals are fundamental for a reason. And the thing is, I don't know. Again, this frenzy, this hype machine has, I think, caused some people to believe that the fundamentals are no longer fundamental. And that is dumb because there will always be a need for well structured information that is sensitive to context. And maybe an AI can do that at some point, but today is not that day. And so to get the tagging right, to get the taxonomy right, to get the concept model right, to get the object structure right, like whatever it is that is fundamental to doing this work doesn't go away because we have a new technology. As much as there are some people who would like that work to go away.
Yeah.
We can get political. You know, there is a probably a group of people who would like to take that understanding away from other groups of people, right? And I think that is part of the agenda here.
Yeah.
Whether AI can do that or not is immaterial. That's what there are people who would like us to believe that work is no longer relevant or not something that humans should be able to do.
Well, let's get into it. I'm curious what you like. Are you talking about those powers that would like to take understanding away from us? Are we talking about like the people at the LM companies? Are we talking about leadership within corporations?
I
Who
think
are
there
we talking?
are. I mean, you're getting into socialist Dan here, but there are people who have accumulated power who would like to preserve, who misunderstand what democracy is and would like to preserve their power either through the, manipulating their way into elected office or by continuing to accumulate money.
Right.
And one of the greatest threats to that is education. And what we see is I have a son in college now, so I'm sort of watching this play out in real time. And, to watch his institution kind of struggle with the political reality that they're facing, which is a lot of these folks, even though higher education made them who they are today or helped make them who they are today, would like to undermine these institutions. And I don't think higher ed is the only institution that's under fire right now, but it's the one that sort of looms
Yeah.
largest in my imagination. So,
Yeah. I think what we're going to see here, and I agree with you that that's happening. I guess the hope that I would give is I believe AI is going to be handing out a lot of Darwin Awards. It's basically just going to like
I like that.
people who want to phone it in are going to have way more tools to phone it in. It's just getting easier and easier and when I say phone it in, like with life, just like, I don't
Yeah.
want to do it. I don't want to do the hard thing for whatever reason. And often people have reasons that they came to that spot in life and that they came to those beliefs in life. But it's just going to become easier and easier to get dumber and dumber, to outsource more and more and more.
Yes.
And those are people that are not going to succeed actually
The,
in this new world versus the people who can see AI and actually become superhuman from AI.
right.
And that I think is available really to everybody. I think that right now, I
Yes.
mean, a pro plan is $20 a month, right? And if you really
Right.
learn how to use it, you can leverage it in a way to make you very, very powerful in this new world. But it's going to be continuing. I think we're going to see more and more of that inverted bell curve.
Yeah. The crucial part, in my opinion, to becoming superhuman, as you put it, with AI, is having a very strong opinion about what its boundaries are.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever I talk to younger designers about this, I say the most important thing you can do right now is have an opinion about where its boundaries are, because you're being fed a narrative that says it can do anything, it can take your job, it can cure cancer. And those things are not true. They were literally just something someone said, they made it up because it serves them. So this tool exists. Maybe it won't exist forever, but for now it exists. And there is a lot of expectations around the tool.
Yeah.
A good designer looks at a tool and goes, how can this help my process? And how will it not help my process, but
Yeah.
still your process?
Yes.
Can I
Yes.
tell you a crazy story that is completely unrelated to this?
Sure, but I want to say one thing real quick.
Oh, yeah.
Just to piggyback on that,
Yeah.
like, because there's a both and as intelligent people, we need to be able to hold the paradox. So yes, boundaries, always be thinking, is this something that I want to outsource? And I also have a sticky note on my computer that says, how can
How?
AI help me with this?
Yeah. I like that framing
Just
because you're
always
asking
thinking.
how, and
Yeah.
you're not like AI, how can AI do this for me? How can AI help me with this? Because there's many
Yeah.
answers to that question. And if
Hmm.
it's just simply, I need a sounding board, I'm going to type my idea in here. And just by virtue of typing the idea, like I see it more clearly, in a sense, AI, you didn't need AI for that, but it helped you with
Yeah.
that. So,
So,
right.
okay, what's your
The best,
unrelated story?
well, it's tangentially related. The
Okay.
best case is when the tool acknowledges its own limitations,
Oh
right?
yeah, which it
And
doesn't always do.
which it doesn't, the AI definitely doesn't do. And, I'm always drawing a parallel to Figma, or back in my day, I started using Visio, right? Like these were tools with very clear boundaries and no one
Hmm.
promised anything more. And the difference that we have today is there's a tool, it's got boundaries, but the people selling the tool are promising so much more. Anyway, a friend of mine is experiencing some medical symptoms and has been chatting up Claude to try and identify what to do about these symptoms.
As you do.
They've been, I don't, but people do that. My friend does that.
Boundaries, okay.
And this has been going on for days. And Claude actually they also use Claude to plan their vacation. So Claude knew they had a vacation coming up.
Mhm.
And they continue to ping Claude, ask Claude, like sort of relentlessly about these symptoms and what to do about it. And Claude sort of got to the end of its rope and said, you should just go on vacation. You have been asking me these questions a lot, and you need to consult with a health professional, because that is the only way I think you're going to get a satisfying answer. You will not get it. We keep going over the same things again and again. You're not going to get a satisfying answer from me. It's those moments when I hear that, and they shared this, so we saw firsthand that this was the response. That says to me that Claude finally, it took a while, but Claude understood its boundaries and chose in whatever way it could, whatever way the mechanism works, to say, no, I'm not going to answer this question for you
Mm,
anymore. And my hope, I see that and I think, okay, if I'm a young designer and I go build a concept model for pet sitting business for me, could Claude say, let's do it together so
mm.
you can internalize it? Like,
Yeah.
is there a world in which the AI understands not that its role is to provide an answer, but to help how it can help
Right.
the human do the
Right.
work the best way?
Yes. And I think a lot of that, and I'm curious about with your friend on whether that your friend had given any instructions to Claude at the high level, or
I don't know.
it had
Yeah.
like realized after a while that like what to do and what not to do for
I
your
don't think that,
friend,
I don't
because
think that,
that's a big part about it of like how you use it and how do you give it high level instructions. And that's another thing on like where like the people that do that intentionally, like I've told Claude, hey, if you see me using you
spinning.
for
Right.
over an or if I'm using it for over an hour, please tell me to go step outside for a second.
That's great. That's
It
good.
hasn't done it yet, though. It doesn't do it, but I'm like,
Go,
eventually it will
Julie.
learn, and I will
But by
tell it.
virtue of you
Yeah,
articulating it,
yeah,
you're self-aware of it, and that takes
yes.
experience, right?
We
To
are like
understand that.
crafting this like it's hard, the mental model. Like I've turned Claude from like a high level, very fancy Google search into a workspace. It is a work environment for me, but it is a work environment that is like molding to me
Yeah.
and like create, and I get to be intentional about what that work environment is. What knowledge do I upload it? How do I create skills? How do I create this environment of projects and skills and knowledge files and instructions so that I can make it so that it can make me into a superhuman instead of making me dumber and dumber and dumber.
I, I like seeing it as a space. I think that's wise. I hear people talking about it as a thought partner or, and I had this realization recently that it's not a thought partner. My last Substack was about how I turned Claude into a laboratory where I could do experiments on
Yes.
information architecture. And that framing, like, opened my eyes and completely changed how I looked at this thing. So,
Yeah, totally. So just for an example, so if we want a meta example, then I have one more question for you.
oh, yeah.
Let's talk about how I prepare for this podcast.
Oh, yeah. How did you prepare for this podcast?
Okay, well, I have a podcast outliner skill that I've created. That skill has, and I have one for solo episode and a one for an interview episode. That skill is like what now? 7, 8 years of podcasting
Mm,
experience baked into that skill, plus me going and saying, okay, be the best podcast, like be an analyzer of podcasts, take my best episodes. What did I do right here? What did I do wrong here? I mean, that skill probably has taken me 15 hours alone just to create that skill. But based on all this experience and based on me also using my researcher mind and saying, okay, what did these podcast professionals do? How do we take this and turn this into a general outline? Okay, so we have the podcast outliner skill that
nice.
is with it already understands my voice. It already understands it's working with other skills too. Went into Gemini, of course, to do some deep research on you. So deep research on
Oh,
Dan,
God.
like that's what Gemini does really, is it'll create like a very academic report. And I was just making sure, like, do I know what I need to know? And how is that going to influence the questions that I'm going
Right.
to ask? And so then I had that research report that I went to Gemini, pulled that into Claude. It knows you now.
It knows me now.
It knows you now. I mean, it already knows you.
I'm
And then it
kind of
had
an open book.
the outliner skill. Then I had all my handwritten notes from our workshop and
Oh,
my
yeah.
journaling from after the workshop. And I'm just like, okay, here's what I want to ask. Here's the things that I'm most interested in. Here's what I'm most curious about. Here's like how the workshop went. Make me the podcast outline. And then we went
Nice.
back and forth 2 to 3 times. Like that would have probably taken me before, like I would have probably prepared for this maybe like 7 or 8 hours. I prepared for maybe 45 minutes.
Right.
And we're having just as good of a
Yeah.
conversation
It doesn't show.
because
It,
I'm able to like use my
yeah.
past knowledge instead of doing it all manually. And
Right.
so that to me is a very workspace feel, like not like
Yeah.
thought partner, because I am doing the thinking. I'm saying like,
Yes.
this is what I'm curious about. This is what I went to the workshop. I took a bunch of handwritten notes. Those notes went into it. And then we got a really solid outline. And now I'm completely riffing on that outline. I'm like, it's there as a backbone, but have
Right.
we followed it? Absolutely not. In the moment I am making these decisions on which questions, like, I'm not like, okay, let me do exactly what the
Right.
AI
Sure.
outputted. Absolutely not. So
That's great.
that's how I prepared.
That's
Meta
amazing.
example. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So last question for you before we wrap up here. So you mentioned, or somebody mentioned, we ended up talking about during the workshop at the Information Architecture Conference. We talked about this systems design loneliness epidemic, like often feeling like you're the only one doing the work. And I see this with my OUXers. They get all excited about it. They learn the Orca process, then they go into organizations,
Right.
and then people are like, "What? Just we need screens yesterday. Like, why are you? We don't have time to do all of this stuff." And they're this like lone wolf there, being like, "I see the light. I see how important this is. I see all the mistakes that we're making. Oh my gosh, we're just going to step on all these landmines going forward because we're not doing this work." And it feels really, really lonely out there. I feel like this is a good thing. To flip it is that there's actually a gap in the market here.
Hmm.
What do you feel like how do you feel about the career opportunities for people who do have this skill, who can see below the screens, even though today it does feel like you go into an organization and it is just like, you're asking too many questions, squash, squash, squash.
There's a need, no doubt.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with you. The need is becoming more acute and will continue to become more acute as the systems we're designing are much more complex and much more reliant on technology that we barely understand. And yet, there is a cultural push for speed. There is a cultural, I mean, sort of corporate cultural push for measurable productivity. And, those are visible outputs. I'm actually reading a great book right now called The Score, which is all about metrics and how we use scoring systems in both in games, which, I love games, but also in kind of everyday life, and how those scoring systems don't always align with our values. So we end up prioritizing the scoring system,
Yeah.
i.e. the number of screens I've designed, rather than the outcomes that our true values. So I think there's still a gap. And I think there are, to do what you did and turn it on its head, I think there's an opportunity that we need to take advantage of, which is to clarify the value of what we do. Because even if people can't do it themselves, we want them to understand that it is important and what it takes to do it well, which is time and resources. But also, what do they get out of the other end of that? So
Yeah.
that's where I'm at with this stuff. And
And
I feel like I have been trying, and I feel like you've been trying, we're trying
yeah.
to get this kind of, and other folks are trying to get the word out as to what is this that we're really talking about and how does it
Yeah.
contribute to the design process. And I think we're going to keep exploring what the narrative is until it resonates.
Right. And I mean, those benefits that we talked about before, like the being able to innovate and understanding your scope and having a shared language for collaboration and prioritization, like there's just like, it's so obvious to us, like that, of course you would do that. You're going to save so much money in the long run by doing that. But I think that there's often, this is a whole other bag of worms that we don't have time to get into, but this idea that there's powers within organizations that have a vested interest in a lack of clarity, or at least in the status quo. And so
Right.
coming in as a change agent and saying like, okay, like these are some underlying issues here, and it's going to be kind of painful to
Right. No,
redoing information architecture is kind of hard.
it's
Like you
hard.
kind of want to
Yeah.
get it right in the beginning, but like
Right.
often that doesn't happen and you got to go back and change it. And that's hard stuff. And so people, yeah, they kind of dismiss it a lot.
Right. Even if the other thing I run into is that it's big. So even if they are okay with it being hard, they don't want it to be big. And so there's this kind of feeling that you always need to start from the beginning with IA.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
believe that there
Yeah.
are structural interventions that we can make
Totally.
midway through the process, late in the anywhere in the process. There are structural
Yeah.
interventions that we can make. And that's another thing that I think gets lost in this.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So what I've been saying a lot is let's just do what was called for a while quiet OUXing, like just do it for yourself, do it so you can ask better
yeah.
questions, do it alone. Don't ask for permission, just start doing it a little bit where
Yes.
you can. Like like subversive OUXing or subversive information architecture, like do it as a rebellion, like
right,
like go underground and do it, and then just ask the most
fighting the patriarchy one object at a time.
And let's end it on that note. So here's what Dan and I kept circling back to in like 6 different ways. You cannot outsource understanding. Outsource the screen, sure. You can even outsource the prototype. Eventually, you'll probably be able to outsource most of the visual execution. But the part where you actually have to figure out what the product is, what the things are, the things that hold the value, what they're called, how they connect, that part doesn't work if you're not the one actually doing it. Because if you haven't built that understanding yourself, you have no way to evaluate the output. Okay, and that is good news because not many people actually are doing this work. I called it the systems design loneliness epidemic, and I think he's right that it does. It feels lonely, but lonely also means rare, and rare and means valuable. So your micro level up here is next time you're kicking off a new project, or even if you're in the middle of a project, before you open up Figma, make a list of the nouns. Just think about the nouns, think about the things. What are the things in this system? That list is the beginning of this work. Okay, so start there. Happy OUXing. Thank you so much for listening to the UX Level Up podcast. If you want to connect with me, Sophia, please follow me on Instagram at SophiaVUX, or you can find me on LinkedIn, Sophia Prater. I'm pretty easy to find there. Our music was brought to you by Ruby Vel, courtesy of Sugaroo Records. Thanks again for listening.